What is growth design? Where does it sit in an organization? How does it impact the business? And why is this discipline the future of design? I spoke with Vander Broek, design group lead at Dropbox, to find out how they approach product growth and design at Dropbox and why he thinks all designers should focus on bringing business value. Enjoy this episode, and if you want to share your feedback, drop me an email at daisy@pony.studio.
Welcome to The Product Show. Insightful interviews with founders and tech leaders sharing how they hack product growth.
Hi Phil, welcome to The Product Show.
Hello, so happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. You know, on our channels, we love discussing exactly the space you come from, merging growth and design, and how these two work with product, where they sit in an organization, how design is impacting the business objectives. So I'm really excited about our chat. Let's first start with your background. What's been your professional journey so far, and how did you become design group lead at Dropbox?
Sure, and so thanks so much for having me. I'm really passionate about the space, and I'm really excited to dig in. So, a little bit about my professional history. I originally studied computer science, and then I went on to study human-computer interaction. I then entered the startup world and actually spent most of my early career as a product designer designing big data tools. So I was designing enterprise software for really specific types of users. And I loved that problem space because there was really hard interaction design problems and really technical problems. And after some time in the big data space, I briefly worked at a venture capital firm as almost like an internal design consultant, which is really fun because I got to be exposed to breadth and a lot of different types of problems. And after that, I was kind of looking for what was next. And I had a couple of key criteria. One is I wanted to work for a company that was really design-centered and had design as a core part of its culture. Secondly, I was looking for something that had a product-led, growth motion, and where the user was really at the center of driving the business forward. So by nature of that, design and user-centered thinking would be core of a company strategy, and something at scale. And as you might imagine, those three kind of key criteria brought me to being a growth designer at Dropbox. And I've been at Dropbox for about 3 years. I've managed a couple different teams within growth at Dropbox. I started on an acquisition team focused on kind of like early part of the user journey, top of funnel. I briefly managed a retention and engagement team, so more like middle stages of the user cycle. And now I manage the whole growth design team, and also another team called business platform team, which does like platform capabilities. So basically, we are a horizontal, which means we span a lot of other teams at Dropbox. We are what we call a engineering product and design team, or like an EPD. Sometimes it's called the three-legged stool, or the triad. Basically, we're part of R&D. And we span a couple of other key groups within the company. We have a core product team that is creating a lot of our core products at Dropbox that most people probably know and love, like our Finder and our sync capabilities. And we also have another team called New Businesses, which is working on some new products that we're working on. Growth works across both of those key product teams. We also work really closely with marketing, which is another horizontal team. They're, of course, their own org, but in many ways, growth and marketing kind of being across all of those other teams own how people discover what Dropbox can offer them, and ultimately try or buy it. And that's kind of our main charter. How do we best help users understand what Dropbox can do for them, evaluate how it fits into their life, and ultimately try and buy it?
Right. So for just to clarify, so growth sits within the design team at Dropbox, and you don't have any other growth teams, right?
That's right. So, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily it sits within design. Design is one key part of growth, which is
Yeah.
engineering, product, and design. But it is true to say that we are really the only growth team within Dropbox. And so, what we really focus on are end-to-end user journeys about how people discover and buy the different types of products and features that our core product and our new businesses create. And it's worth saying that we've gone through a little bit of a journey to land on this type of organizational model. And I think one of the key questions is like, how does growth exist in companies? And I think there's not any right answer. In the past, for example, we used to own really specific parts of the journey, like activation or onboarding. And it's totally a viable model. Over the time, as Dropbox has increased its number of products that we offer, those core product teams now own activation and engagement. And what growth is owning is basically broadly, as there are users out in the world and within our products, how do those users discover and understand all the types of value that we offer our users, such that they can get the maximum amount of value out of it. So it's like product discovery, upsell, and cross-sell are some of the key moments that growth is owning within Dropbox right now.
Right, and Dropbox has become a huge organization, right? It employs over 2,000 people. So how do you make sure that communication is not broken, that there are no silos between departments, especially marketing, engineering, and design? How do you stay lean and flexible despite your size? And also, how do you avoid design and tech debt?
Yeah, and it's such a great question for a team like growth in the structure that we are. Like I said before, we are a horizontal, meaning we're a team that spans lots of other teams. And that creates a lot of really amazing opportunities because we get to kind of be the strategic broad team, but it also creates a lot of challenges around communication and coordination, like you're talking about, because each of the teams that we kind of span have their own strategies, their own roadmaps, their own, outcomes that they're trying to drive. And so here we are, one team that spans a lot of other teams. How do we stay aligned that we're working on the right things such that we can deliver a good cohesive experience and business results? And it's been one of the most challenging parts of, I think, my role and broadly as a leadership team within growth. And what I can do is I can tell you a little bit about some of the successful things we've implemented to help that. I think,
absolutely, yes, please.
Yeah. So one of the, and I'll focus in on one kind of like case study. Within growth, we work really closely with marketing, and I think. For us, we have some shared ownership of some key surface areas of Dropbox, namely a lot of Dropbox.com, a lot of our marketing website. And as you can imagine, marketing is its own really large organization who does a ton of different things, all the way from SEO, SEM to campaigns and things like that. And growth is doing a lot of things that are sometimes related and sometimes unrelated. And in the past, we hit some challenges about who really owned what on the website. And some of the conversations we got into were overly focused on roles and responsibility and ownership and building walls and trying to almost, build walled gardens such that we felt like we could focus. And the fail mode there was each team was shipping different things to users without being able to look across what we were shipping and without being able to focus on creating a cohesive user experience. So if a user landed on a landing page that marketing created, they'd see one type of message. If they landed on a landing page that growth had been working on, they'd see another type of message, which is, both bad for a user experience and ultimately bad for the business. We've proven through experiments that when you have a fractured user experience, it just doesn't convert as well. So there's a real business opportunity there. So what we've been working on over the past, really probably about year, is coming up with ways that marketing and growth can work together to build cohesion across experiences. So we can, create great experiences that drive results. And the way we've done that is to really level up what the outcomes that we were working towards And how do we create alignment about the overall goals the teams are working on across a couple different dimensions. The first dimension is really like, what are the business outcomes that we're focused on? And these are things like CAC, like cost of acquisition, other things like conversion rates to particular types of products, and making sure that we're not just looking at, how good is an SEO campaign and how good is like which marketing owns, and how good is let's say a plans page that growth owns. In the micro world, making those better is good, but if you're not focused on business outcomes across the entire experience, you're going to end up with optimizing just small parts of the experience. So first of all, we needed to outline, how do we align on business outcomes across marketing growth? Then the second one is experience. Again, we had some breakdowns in cohesive experiences across different pages. So we really focused on coming up with an experience strategy where we could look across the user journey holistically, not focus on ownership in the organization, but focus on the user and their journey across our pages. And there's a pretty typical kind of like journey a user goes on, where they build awareness, they discover what we offer, they evaluate whether it fits into their life, and then they commit to buying or trying something. So this kind of awareness, discovery, evaluate, commit is a user journey, not an organizational model. And by really focusing on a experience strategy to support that journey from an end-to-end perspective, we could align on the types of experiences we wanted to bring to users, and then go off to our separate teams and go create experiences that map up to that overall journey. So that's experience. So again, there's like a business alignment, there's experience alignment. And lastly, there was technology alignment. And basically, I won't go too deep here, but the way you build technology can enable cohesive business strategies or cohesive experience strategies. So for example, like have a modern CMS that can enable a design system to be used across all areas. And that's really critical because it's a key tenet of offering cohesive experiences that drive business results. So I think the key outcome here was, how do we level up outside of specific silos into goals that span orgs on business, experience, and technology, such that we can look towards the same future and be aligned. And I think one big learning here is that kind of strategic alignment at those higher levels is in addition to roles and responsibilities and ownership. That's really important. Ownership, helps us focus and helps us know where we need to spend time. So, growth does own some things. Marketing does own some other things. That's good. But by aligning at the higher level strategies, when we go off into those worlds that we own, we know we're working towards a common good. And I think that was the big change that we've made. And I should say it's a journey. We're still working on it. But the future is bright. And I think we've made a lot of progress in this area.
And in practical terms, in order to achieve that, did you need to kind of restructure teams, improve communication, maybe add an extra layer in the management team? How did it work to make sure that everyone is actually understanding the bigger impact their work is bringing?
Yeah, and this is really important. Again, I think it is hard because marketing and growth are different for good reasons. What we've ended up doing is creating a team that is comprised of marketing team and growth team that meets to look at our common goal and basically share what our roadmap is to see how we are working towards that common goal. So we have good visibility into everyone's work. And, tangibly speaking, that does mean different types of rhythms. So we have something like a biweekly meeting with our marketing partners. Me as a leader, I have some leadership meetings with some key marketing partners so we can continue to stay aligned. And getting to a place where we had common purpose for those meetings to be effective was challenging. Again, that was also a journey to build that relationship that, hey, we're looking towards making a shared goal such that this is effective time together and not kind of overhead or anything like that. So it really is about building partnerships. And that does mean changing behaviors about how we meet and how we do our work.
Can you share the findings from an interesting growth experiment that you've run recently? What did you learn from it, and what was the impact?
I'm gonna share one particular story that I really like because to me it embodies the ideal growth team win. And what that win looks like is when a growth team does research to understand what the problem is, works with all cross-functional partners that are required to make a better experience, meaning we really actually improve the user experience, and that user experience drives business results. To me, that should be the playbook that growth operates on. And I really like that idea because sometimes growth is considered like, hey, designers need to balance user experience and business results. And it's very true. We do. But the aspirational state is not necessarily even just balancing, but we create better experiences that create more business results. And there's that win-win world where we can really focus on maximizing experiences to drive business results. So to ground this in an example, at Dropbox, one of the teams we have is called acquisition and growth, and they manage the basically the Dropbox.com, where again people will discover, evaluate, and determine to try particular products. And one of the areas of opportunities for us was in one of our key pages and journeys, where which you can go to. It's dropbox.com/individual, and you can see we recently updated that page. And we had been doing a lot of research on the website and how people go through that journey, meaning, there's a lot of different entry points. The user might land on the homepage, then they might determine that a particular product is right for them and go to an individual page and then go to a plans page. And from doing a lot of research, we found that people didn't understand what Dropbox was and what it could do for them, particularly if they were a personal user. So, how does Dropbox help me share my files? What does it mean for my files to be in the cloud? Questions like that. And knowing that that was a problem, okay, people don't understand what Dropbox is, what it can do for them. We set out on exploring different ways to solve that. And one key to successful approach here is we worked with brand design, we worked with marketing, we worked with marketing writing, basically content, product design, and then of course the key like engineering, product research, and analysts. And it was really important that we worked with brand and marketing and writing, which maybe are sometimes considered less key partners in a lot of product development, but for growth is really, really essential because some of the areas, some of the problem areas were brand problems. Or maybe I should say we had an opportunity to use brand to help people understand what Dropbox is and what it can do for them. We had an opportunity to use writing, clear language to help users understand. So did a lot of kind of typical design process where we brought people in, we did some brainstorming. We came up with some key principles about how we would approach the solution space, and some of them map to our company values, such as one of our company values is make work human, which I really love. And when we took that company value in to our sessions and we looked at the current experience, we realized there are some gaps between how our webpage is and what our value is, such as there were some of our imagery was overly abstract and a little bit more like, almost like modern art, and less about like people using software. We didn't have as much images of what the software was. So people didn't really understand Dropbox. Well, we weren't really showing them what it was and how it could fit into their world. And then when we looked at some of the ways that some of the copy was written, again, it was there was an opportunity to make it about what the value we provided to a user in terms of what either their job to be done was, or given their potential needs. So the end experience was basically a page that had a much better flow. So kind of the true user experience stuff. We knew where users were coming from and where they would land and how they would work through that page in a productive way. It used updated brand imagery that had real people and copy that was about users and what it could do for them. And overall, a much better user experience. People could more easily determine what Dropbox was and what it could do for them. It fit in with our brand and marketing guidelines and ultimately drove business results. So I love that story because we were able to win across the board. We updated the page to be more in line with our company values of making it human. It was a better brand experience, a better marketing experience, overall better customer experience, and people ended up converting better. And I just love that playbook.
It is really like a playbook, and especially I think what is remarkable is how you manage to cooperate with all the other departments. So that is a really great example. Right. So another topic I wanted to discuss with you is measuring the value of design, the business value of design. This has become like an extremely hot topic in the last few years. Connecting the dots between business outcomes and design used to be considered something, almost impossible, which is changing. And there are a number of reasons for that. We have better tools on the market. Designers are becoming more interested in data. The bottom line is design is not just a creative discipline anymore. As a design leader, can you tell me what is causing this shift, and also your advice to designers who are struggling to prove the value of their work?
Yeah, and I love this question. I completely agree. This is a really hot topic within the broader tech community and within the broader design community. And as a growth design leader, I'm really, really passionate about it because I think ultimately for design to be successful in a tech org or a business, we really do have to understand the business needs and how our work contributes to it. So I think, broadly speaking, what are some of the reasons that this is changing? I just think that design is continuing to become known as an essential part of tech organizations, and mostly because we can be one of the key teams that helps build wonderful customer experiences. And I think there's a long history of caring about the end user experience, and that being as a critical component to being part of a successful business. And I think, key things like how do people understand some key business metrics like acquisition and adoption, especially in a B2B SaaS company that's product led. The only way you're going to get acquisition and activation healthy numbers is if you have great user experiences, because we don't have sales team going out to customers. We have users either organically finding our products and discovering it, or maybe word of mouth, which is a really common acquisition play within Dropbox. The only way those users are going to convert and activate is if we build great products. So I think that's one of the reasons that, broadly speaking, design has become a really critical part of businesses and tech in general. And I really like the question around practical advice about proving the value of the work for designers, because I think one nice thing about growth is that business results typically speak for themselves. Right. It's really easy for people to understand when you acquire X amount more users or generate X amount of new revenue. That's wonderful. So, we as designers have that. That's much easier for us than some other teams. But I think sometimes the design value in that story is lost. And I think this is the key part for designers in growth, and really growth teams in general, to consider, is that it's really important, and it's really our responsibility as designers to show what the end user experience was that drove the results. And it's our responsibility to show what the critical design decisions were that drove those results. And so what that might look like, for example, is, let's say you're trying to optimize a conversion funnel. It's important to not just say, we ran experience X that drove X amount of ARR. We want to say, hey, here's the user journey. Here's where we felt like was the biggest opportunity. Here are the explorations we made. And we, as designers, made a critical judgment based on research and analysis, quantitative, qualitative, whatever. We took in a bunch of data and triangulated what we thought the best idea was, meaning we show leadership, we show critical judgment, and we created this experience. And you see how this experience maps to that user journey and the user mental model or whatever it is, and converts better at X, Y, Z. And that shows how design has considered the user, has considered the business, and made critical judgments to drive the business forward. And I think that storytelling is uniquely design's responsibility. It's also, uniquely designed skill. Typically designers are passionate and good about storytelling. And I think part of the reason is that it's too easy to tell a story about, we ran X experiment that drove X results. What we really need to do is start to say, as a part of that experiment, we assessed what the problem was. We made critical judgments, and that drove the business. And a part of that is really understanding the business, which is hard, and it really does take time, because we really need to be fluent with things like CAC, cost to acquire customers, ARR, recurring revenue over the year, or maybe like MRR, monthly recurring revenue, or whatever it might be, particular types of conversions. Couple key reasons that's really important. One, it's actually part of our decision-making process. It just needs to be a fundamental part of the way we make decisions about what experiences we want to make. Secondly, communication and credibility. We need to be able to go to our partners in business or in product and understand the state of the business and how we're making business decisions, and also communicate how our design decisions relate to those business decisions. Lastly, I will say, it is also design's unique contribution to measure the user experience. And there's a lot of different ways to measure the user experience. You could use, like a survey to do things like SUS, like system usability score, or, customer effort score, or things like that. I think, or even NPS, there's a lot of different ways, or just qualitative. I think a key part of the story as well is making sure that we can be stewards of good user experiences, such that when we drive business results, there's a key experiential user experience lens into the results that we drive.
Right. Do you think that designers are, some designers are still having a difficult relationship with data and maybe in marketing terms? Is this something that the majority of designers need to work on?
After spending some time in growth design, I think there's this kind of concept of a tour of duty within professional career. And I strongly believe that designers should do a tour of duty in growth design, because I think it builds really healthy muscles about thinking super broadly, working with a lot of different people in the business, learning general business, how businesses work, learning about, business metrics and things like that, such that, hey, maybe you don't want to work in growth design forever, but you just built critical skills that when you go back to either core product design or something like that, you can apply those learnings in that space. So to me, I think the business side and the analysis side should really be key ways we think about product design's role. And when we think about the impact that product design drives, or design in general, there's going to be, customer experience impact. Has to be some way we measure our success, because we need to make great customer experiences. Business impact should be another key pillar of the way we drive impact. So I think it's essential. I'm really excited about that. As kind of growth design starts to mature, my hope is that, it's not growth design only happens in growth. It's like, actually, we've got a set of, ways we think about doing design that can and should be applied to other places. I've seen a lot of appetite for designers learning business. And of course, I'm in growth design. So, I get a lot of inbound about, hey, how can we learn more about this? But I really do feel like that this is an emerging area of interest. And I think when I look to the future, it's going to continue to grow.
What's your take on the growth design definition? Like 3 years ago, this wasn't even a thing. Now it's everywhere. Like a year and a half ago, we sat down with our founder and said, okay, we've been practicing this for so long. We've been Googling what it is. There is no formal definition. So what we did, we sat down, we wrote our definition. And now when you Google it, it's one of the first places, just because, it wasn't popular. But things are changing. So I want to hear your definition. What's your take on it?
Oh, amazing. Well, I feel like I need to go and Google your definition.
You do need to set up a Wikipedia page.
I probably should have done that to prepare for this interview. But that's amazing. You're ranking so highly. I'll check it out.
Pure coincidence, no competition.
Yeah. Or that you're growth minded and you know how SEO works.
True.
So respect. You're putting words into practice. So for me, I think the definition of growth design goes back to kind of maybe what I was talking about before. I think growth design is all about creating great experiences for users that drive business results, and unpacking that a little bit, so it's a little bit like an equation. Within that equation, I think design is typically uniquely responsible for and able to be stewards of a quality experience. And it's really important that that part of growth design is considered, because the wonderful world that I want to live in growth design is where we get to that playbook where we know users' problems, we know business opportunities, and we create a win-win where better experiences drive better business results. And it's all too easy to drive business results with bad user experiences. And I think that's where growth hacking, I should say growth hacking is a super loaded word that I do not love, but it's grown into have a lot of negative connotations, where, bad user experiences drive business results. We can and we should do better. And, we've shown through a lot of experimentation that it is possible to do, to get a win-win for user experience. So like that equation, create experiences that drive business results. I think it's essential to keep users at the heart of it. We really do need to understand who they are and what's right for them. Because then when we create specific experiences that drive business results, it's relevant to their journey and their mental model. Another part of it, we need to be business thinkers, like I talked about before. And lastly, maybe what I would say is, like, within growth design, typically tend to be broad thinkers, focus on end-to-end user journeys, and really thinking about experiences over product surfaces. Oftentimes core product teams will own products and really own specific product services. Typically growth design, from what I've seen, is not as tied to a specific product surface, but more tied to an end-to-end journey and looking at where opportunities are and then mapping that to either surfaces that do or do not exist. So, maybe we need to make one small change here and we actually need to make a screen over here. And so that kind of broad thinking from end-to-end journey perspective is, I think, a key part to understanding, approach to being a growth designer.
Another thing that I wanted to talk about is, what do you think makes a good designer in 2021 and beyond? What qualities are you looking for when hiring designers for your team? We've been through a very intense recruitment process here at Pony recently, and we started the process with having this clear idea of what sort of a designer we are looking for in terms of experience, skills, background. And then throughout the process, we realized, hang on, what we're actually looking for is someone who is adaptable, who is willing to learn, who is not afraid of change and is actually comfortable with change. Because things in our industry change so fast that, in my opinion, that's the only way to stay on the top of your game. And it turned out that this was the most important thing for me. So I'm just curious, what are you looking for when hiring designers for your team?
Yeah, great question. I'm really passionate about hiring. I lead a team within Dropbox called Mod Squad, which is a cross-discipline set of designers who create our hiring practices. And I also led kind of a redesign of our entire product design, hiring process, and hiring attributes. So I've been really involved in hiring at Dropbox, and it's something I really, really care about. I'll talk a little bit specifically about what I look for within growth design, because I can have a whole nother podcast series about hiring for design in general. But within growth design, a couple of things that you said really, really resonate with me. I think that one of the key things is a designer who is impact oriented, such that they get really excited about driving either better customer experiences or better business results. And I think that's really important because that's not a tried and true muscle. within designers, and especially people who are maybe a little bit earlier in their careers. Like, for example, designers come from all sorts of different backgrounds, but very rarely are you ever taught what it means to drive business results. Especially if you went to a traditional design or like HCI background, it's really about craft and craft fundamentals, or maybe like user-centered thinking, which is wonderful. Like, absolutely need those foundations. But being able to find somebody who's really excited about that business impact means that they're going to be a good fit, because when we get into the world where we talk about our goals and things like that, like, they can get energized. Secondly, like you said, growth mindset and appetite to learn is super important for working in growth. And I think this applies both to their personal growth as a designer and their approach to work. So as a personal growth perspective, one criteria we don't look for growth design is past experience doing growth design. Because, like you said, it's an emerging field. Oftentimes people just don't have a ton of experience. So if we said you have to have experience doing growth design, our market of designers would be way too small. We would just never hire anyone. So, rather than that as a prerequisite, we want to say, like, okay, are you, do you like learning? Are you interested in a broad set of things? Because you're going to be working in, like, a really broad set of areas with like marketers, with like marketing writers, like PMMs, like brand design, like analysts. So, do they have a growth mindset? Do they have an appetite to learn? Have they demonstrated proactively, going out and learning things on their own, whether it's even like, I read a book on X or I took a course on X. So that's a big thing. And then, of course, the approach to work, growth is typically iterative, and growth is all about learning. And that's a really key frame for how we think about experiments. So learning is really key. Lastly, collaboration and generalist mindset. Again, we work with so many different types of people. Being able to have productive conversations in healthy ways and being able to have a generalist mindset is important. And then the last thing I want to talk about, because a lot of those are more about like mindsets, there's of course a major craft component to being a growth designer. And the two key things on the craft side for design would be user-centered. What I love about growth, certainly at Dropbox, but I think a lot of other places too, from conversations in the industry, is we are, again, as a horizontal, we work across all of our different users within Dropbox. So being able to be super user-centered, to understand who our users are and what their needs are, means we can deliver a good experience to them. So the user-centeredness is important. And then lastly, being able to think in end-to-end journeys and using interaction design. It's not about like surface areas. It's typically not as much about like really deep interaction models, which I also love, and they have their place in the world. But for growth design, it's really about end-to-end journeys and interaction design, about how the surfaces we make will fit into that overall end-to-end journey.
How do you see the industry evolving in the next decade or so? Some say we're living in the era of design. Others believe design will become a commodity soon. What do you think we'll need more of, and which parts of the design process will really become a commodity?
Yeah, I mean, in general, for me, I am super bullish on design leadership and design in general continuing to grow. I think even over the past 5 years, the number of design executives and design founders, or just design leaders in general, continue to grow. And I think what I would expect to see is that design leaders and designers in general continue to shape products and services by looking beyond interaction design and visual design and looking into all the adjacent worlds that contribute to an end user experience, such as like marketing, customer support, recruiting. And, that really, I think a lot of the aspiration there is like design is looked at and used as and contributes as a strategic partner to determine what problems to solve and then how to solve them. And I think, to me, that I'm seeing more of that, and that's what keeps me energized. And that's why I think design is here to stay. And I think with that definition, like design is a commodity. If you think of design as a set of practices to understand customers, their needs, and think holistically about problems and solutions, it's very unlikely that will become a commodity. I think that gives me that, like, the point of view that design's all the more important and the expected quality bar of products and services continues to get raised. So even as things like, let's say, AI or VR continues to happen, like, to me, it's great. That just creates more opportunities to create great customer experiences, and design's role could be like the sets of practices to make that happen. So that's not to say like parts of design won't become a commodity. I think, it's possible that some parts of, let's say, like web or mobile interaction design and visual design can become commodified, which in some ways has been happening for some time, even with, like, we think about, like, from, I don't know, maybe at this point, like 7 or 8 years ago when Bootstrap came out, like, like one of the first web design systems, like in many ways that commodified parts of the web design. And there's lots of like Bootstrap websites, but that to me was like a great contribution to the community. It really enabled a lot of people who didn't have like a lot of design, let's say, backgrounds, create products that were at least, again, that quality bar got raised. So to me, those are good, because those are tools, those are building blocks that we as designers can take and then improve on, or people out in the world. So that to me doesn't scare me. In fact, I'm really excited about things like that.
That's been absolutely amazing. So much food for thought, and thank you so much for your insights. And before I let you go, Phil, tell me, if you were starting in design now, how would you spend the first 3 months of your career?
Well, I think it's a great question. For me, reflecting on my career and where I've seen, let's say, people who are new to the industry be super successful, I would, one, just focus on foundations. It's just super important that you can get the nuts and bolts of design in place, which is typically things around craft, and craft broadly speaking, in terms of like, again, being user-centered, understand what it means to like frame problems, understand what it means to ideate on solutions, get into great interaction design and visual design. Those are the nuts and bolts that will just continue to reap rewards as design career continues to grow. Even as a design leader, lean on things like problem framing. So focus on craft. And then secondly, make sure you get an environment where, you're supported. And of course, that could be at a company that really has design as a central part, but more often than not, it's really about finding even a team or a person, like a mentor. And that could be, the designer, the other designer on the team, that could be the design manager. But as someone new, it's just really important that you can work with other people who know what good looks like and has some, like a tool kit of practices that you can learn from. And to me, if you start there, focus on foundations, get into an environment where you're supported, those are, you're good to go for the first 3 months, if not years.
Thank you so much for your time, Phil. Where can people find you on the internet?
The best place to find me, I'm not huge on social media, actually. I do have a Twitter account, but I mostly just follow people. So unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to say LinkedIn, which is really lame. I have a website, but the website's kind of outdated too. So maybe you can go and find me on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is the place.
The Product Show is brought to you by Pony, a design studio helping startups and scale-ups build and optimize their digital products at speed. Check pony.studio to learn more.